Hey guys, today's notes are on the life cycle of the stars. We've been talking about that in class, and you guys have done your presentations last week. And today we're just going to take some notes on the life cycle of a star. And these are going to be some brief notes, so not very long, just coloring. So you're going to need a couple colors, reds, yellows, greens. It doesn't really matter with the colors as long as you have some colors to color it up on your page. So at the top of your page, and actually before you get here, I don't have on here, make sure you go to your table of contents and put in there star death, the life cycle of stars. Today is October 15th. All right, so we're going to get started here. So first, we start with our Big Bang. We've talked a lot about the Big Bang. All right, it starts as a singularity that starts to explode and expand. And during the Big Bang, when it's expanding, we get a lot of atoms starting to form, and our lightest elements that form are our hydrogens. So these are our hydrogen atoms right here. So let me see if I can pull this down for us and make sure. Oh, there we go. All right. So once our hydrogen atoms start to form, then we go into the process called nucleosynthesis. And if you remember, nucleosynthesis is where those atoms start to combine and form a nucleus. So remember, nucleo means nucleus, synthesis means to synthesize or create. So we start to get some isotopes. We had protium, deuterium, tritium, and these are all isotopes of hydrogen. So they have more neutrons that are needed, so that's what makes them an isotope. So from this nucleosynthesis, from these new elements we start to make, we get clumps of hydrogen forming together, bigger and bigger clumps, and this is what we call a nebula. It's a big cloud of gas and dust in space starting to spin around itself. So this is the clumps of hydrogen forming. So the term for this is nebula. You guys did that in your presentations last week. Let me hide this right here, get that out of the way. Good. And from the nebula, move down for us. Hold on. We get nuclear fusion. So in nuclear fusion, that's when the atoms start fusing together. So this is where we start getting our hydrogens meeting up with other hydrogens, and they form helium. All right, so two hydrogens come to form helium. You guys did this in that Marshmallow lab. So what we have now is a protostar. So from our nebula, we have a baby star forming, and that is what's called a protostar. And that's where our hydrogens are bumping into each other, and they start to fuse together to form our helium. And from there, let me see if I go higher here. Hopefully my page is working. Oh, there we go. No, there we go. All right. So after a protostar has been around, that hydrogen has formed into helium. We're starting to run out of the hydrogens that are able to form into helium. So now we have a lot of helium inside that star. So what that helium will start doing is form with hydrogens to form carbon. And carbon will start colliding with the helium to form oxygen. And this will happen all the way through iron. So one of the heavier elements. So this process will keep going through all the way through iron. And this is called the main sequence phase of the star. This is where our sun is right now. It's in the main sequence phase. It's in the stable phase. It's where it wants to be. Everything is perfect. And everything is fusing all the way through iron during the stage. And remember, at this stage, too, everything is balanced. Gravity pushing in on the star, gas pressure pushing out. So everything is stable at this point in the star's life. So from main sequence, a star can go two ways. Let me see if I can pull this up. Move up, move up. Sorry, guys. Just having some issues here. There we go. I want to zoom in down. There we go. All right. So from the main sequence phase here, our star can go two ways. If it's a medium star, what's going to happen to it? It's going to become a red giant, and it's going to burn out and die. It's going to become a white dwarf, then a black dwarf eventually, and just die off. So that's a medium star. This is what's going to happen to our sun. All right, so it's going to become a red giant. then burn out and eventually die. If our star was a massive star, what would happen? It would start to expand and get very, very large. It become what's called a red supergiant. So it gets super, super big. And from this stage, what would happen to our red supergiant? It would turn into a supernova. So a supernova is that big explosion, and it would create 86 elements after iron. So all the heavy elements that are after iron are created in a supernova. All right, so iron is created through the main sequence, then every element after iron is created during a supernova explosion. Then, based off the size of the stars, if it's super, super, super massive, it would turn into a black hole. Stars that are not as massive would turn into a neutron star. So a massive star has two endings to its life. It could either become a neutron star or a black hole. And guys, this is it for the notes for today. Very, very short, not that hard. I brought you back up here to the top. This is where you want to start, so make sure you have that. And remember, we go from the Big Bang and we get our hydrogen. Our hydrogen and nucleosynthesis starts to form isotopes, protium, deuterium, tritium through nucleosynthesis. Then we get our clumps of hydrogen forming in the form of nebula. And our nebulas eventually start to form protostars, where our hydrogens start bumping in, forming helium. Then our protostars eventually turn into main sequence stars, where it's where our hydrogen and helium start forming carbon, oxygen, all the way through iron. And based off the size of the star, after the main sequence phase, a star could either burn out and die and become a black dwarf, or if it's massive enough, it will expand to become a red supergiant, eventually a supernova, and then from there, depending on its size, can become a black hole or a neutron star. What I'm going to show you really quick here at the end of the notes is a quick video to help you understand this a little bit better. So let me pull that up for you guys, make sure it's able to record. All right, and I think we're good to go.
But way out there in space, there's huge clouds of dust and gas. And if one of those clouds of dust and gas is massive enough, its own gravity causes it to start to collapse. So it falls in on itself. And towards the center of that cloud, it gets denser and denser. It gets hotter and hotter. And eventually, the particles that the gas and the dust are made of are brought so close together that they start to stick together. They start to fuse. That's the energy source of a star. The star switches on and begins to shine.
Inside every newborn star, hydrogen atoms are fused together to make helium. This process is called fusion, and it creates the energy that powers every star. What happens to a star during the rest of its life depends on how massive it is at its birth.
A star like the Sun is in a delicate balance between gravity, which wants to make the star collapse in on itself, and the pressure that pushes outwards that comes from the energy that's been produced in these fusion reactions happening at its core. However, at some point in the future, the hydrogen runs out. And at that point, the core of the star will start to collapse in on itself under its own weight. It gets denser, it gets hotter, until a point where you can actually start to use the helium atoms themselves as the fuel for the fusion, pushing helium atoms together and making carbon and oxygen the next heavier elements in the periodic table.
As the star begins to fuse helium, it creates more energy, and that causes the outer layers of the star to expand. One day, our sun will grow so large it will swallow up the inner planets of the solar system, out as far as the Earth. It will become a red giant. For the sun, this will be the beginning of the end.
What happens is that the outer layers of the star get farther and farther from the middle. The force of gravity that they feel is getting weaker and weaker. And actually, the star loses hold of its outer atmosphere. Its outer atmosphere drifts off out into space. It expands out to become a planetary nebula. And they're some of the most beautiful objects in the universe.
Once the outer layers have drifted away, all that is left of the star is its core.
A white dwarf star is the dead remnant core of a star like the Sun at the end of its life. What's left behind is something that might weigh as much as half the mass of the Sun, but it's only about the size of the Earth. So it's an incredibly dense object. It's dead. There's no nuclear fusion going on it anymore. It's incredibly hot, but then over millions of years it will gradually cool down to become a black dwarf.
Some stars, however, are much more massive than the Sun, and they lead very different lives. They are able to fuse heavier and heavier elements inside their core. The star gets bigger and bigger. Some grow up to 1,000 times the size of our Sun, until it has fused elements all the way up to iron.
And once we've formed an iron core, there's no more energy can be got from fusion. That core collapses. The rest of the star starts to collapse in after it, but then it bounces off. There's a huge shock wave, and in just a second, bang, the outer parts of the star are blasted off into space in a huge supernova explosion. These supernova explosions are so powerful that when one of these stars explodes, it can actually outshine the whole galaxy of which it's part, a galaxy of maybe 100,000 million stars.
For these supergiant stars, all that is left is the super-dense core, known as a neutron star, an object that can have a mass greater than our Sun, but be less than 20 kilometers across. But for the most massive stars of all, we think when the core collapses, the gravity is so strong, it becomes a black hole, from which not even light can escape.
So stars are actually the places in the universe where the elements are created.
After the Big Bang, our universe contained only hydrogen and helium. All the other heavier elements were therefore fused inside stars.
The amazing thing is that virtually everything you see around you was made inside a star billions of years ago before the sun and the planets were formed. And when that star died and blasted its guts out into space, that formed the raw materials from which our sun, the planet Earth, and indeed ourselves were made. And actually, I think that ultimately that's one of the major reasons why I think understanding stars is crucial, because it's actually telling us where we came from.
All right, guys. So those were our notes for today. Hopefully you'll learn a little bit more from that video. If you still have questions, please ask, and have a great day. Later.